Planet Institute.
Hello, and welcome to R&D Unplugged, a podcast from the Learning Planet Institute in which we discuss with researchers on the impact of their work in a simple way. My name is Serge St. Today's guest is Serge Stinckwich. He's a computer scientist and the head of research at the United Nations University Institute in Macau. This is a think tank that works on the contributions of digital technologies for sustainable development and looks at how they can mitigate the risks. Welcome, Serge.
Hi.
Serge, your research is about the modeling of complex systems, social simulation, and the impact of AI on the Sustainable Development Goals, the famous SDGs. But before we get there, let me start with a funny question. If your research had a theme song, what would it be and why?
Thank you for this opportunity to be part of this podcast, Shab. So, it's a tricky question for sure. In music, in fact, I have since a long time an interest on electronic music and experimental music, and I like composers like Pierre-Henry or Stockhausen since a long time. And I have also an interest in minimal music, minimalism, and algorithmic generated music like John Cage, Monte Young. And so maybe for the song that you want to have for this podcast, maybe I'm thinking about kinds of music coming from Kraftwerk, a German band, and in 1981 they released an album called Computer World. And one of the songs I like is the one called Pocket Calculator, because it's I don't know if you know the song.
I don't.
Yeah, it's just give you a few maybe part of the song. So I'm the operator of this pocket calculator, and I'm adding, subtracting, and controlling. So I feel it's very close to where I was when I started to do computer science when I was very young. So thinking about the use of computers to change the world.
Great choice from a legendary band.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks. Serge, what inspired you to pursue this particular research topic?
I have a strong interest on using AI and digital tools to solve global pressing issues like the SDGs that you mentioned, the Sustainable Development Goals. And it's not something new. So I think it started when I was a kid, or in the 80s, 90s. I was, maybe about this program that was in school, the informatic for tools, computing for all in school, and I remember I used computers to learn foreign languages, and I found a way, in fact, to cheat, because I was able to stop the program and find always the good answers for this kind of exercise. So I was interested by computer science, so I do later a PhD in distributed AI, and progressively I moved from kinds of very theoretical AI background and computer science background to something more useful, because I was thinking that I need to have some kinds of impact when I use computers. So I progressively moved to something more close to modeling and simulation of complex systems, especially applied in context of global south developing countries. So I work in different countries for IRD, the French Research Institute for Sustainable Development in Vietnam and Cameroon. And now I'm part of the United Nations universities, or even more applied, trying to do recommendations for about digital technologies for member states and UN organizations. But even it's more applied, still evidence-based recommendation, because I think science is important.
You mentioned impact. We're going to talk about that a lot. How does your research contribute to the issues that the world is facing right now? And there are many.
I think I already mentioned that I try to move in the direction. I start with AI. I try to move in the direction to be more impactful, and I have the privilege to live in developing countries, and so I was in the position to understand better some global issues and especially in Africa. And I remember I supervised some students, PhD students in Cameroon a few years ago, and then we met from time to time in my office, and one day he was telling me that he was not able to make any progress since the last time we met, and I was a bit upset about that, and he told me that, but there's no electricity power in my neighborhood, so for a few days, so I was not able to work. So when you are working for developing countries in that context, is something to remember. It's that you have lots of infrastructure, lots of issues, governance issues also, and you have to think about that when you are doing research in that specific context. Yeah.
Let's get a bit concrete. What were some of the key findings from your research specifically?
It's always difficult to talk about his research, and for sure I have shared some of the project that I've done in the past. So and I think it's a tendency in computer science to use more and more to use only computers to solve issues of the world, and I think this is something I realize. I don't know if it's a key finding, but as something that's progressive, I realize that we need to also think about the systems as a kind of ecosystem with different actors and different power dynamics. And so it's very important to not only think about the use of computers, but also to try to think about how the different disciplines can be part of that. So I think it's, and this is something I try to do in my research also, because I'm talking a lot in my team with people with different backgrounds, social scientists, psychologists, health experts. So I think it's if you want to solve the global pressing issues that we have nowadays about climate change, poverty, etc., we need to have this kind of dialogue in between researchers to try to find solutions, not only purely technical solutions that we can find out quite easily as computer scientists, but try also to discuss with other kinds of approaches and disciplines. And this is quite difficult, actually.
Yeah, of course. How do you make the bridge between your research and real life? Or maybe more specifically, do you want to share an anecdote or a story about your research directly impacting or changing someone's life? I guess that's not very common, but I'm asking the question nonetheless.
Yeah, I think when we are doing research, we have to stay humble. I think we have at the end very little impact, unfortunately. So I think the most impactful way that I contribute to was maybe in terms of education, I guess, because education make a difference. So I was able to, during my career, to supervise different students in different countries, and I think this is the most impactful activities I have done. And for sure, I have done also activities with local communities and trying to develop programs and models and computational models, because it's my main areas of interest. But I think it's the education and the supervision is probably the most impactful way that we are doing as computer scientists. And train the next generation is important. Train the leaders of the next generation.
Can't argue with that. Let's now imagine I'm 20 years old. Disclaimer, I'm not, but let's just imagine. And I want to change the world for the better, and I come to you, Serge, and I ask you, Serge, why should I engage in research? Number one. And number two, why should I choose your research topic?
Yeah, so it's a difficult question. Yeah, for sure. I understand that for the young people, it's a difficult time. It's maybe very different from where we have 20 years. Nowadays, everyone is doing AI, so it's. So I would suggest to young person to be curious. I think it's very important to try to be interdisciplinary if you want to do research. I know that it's difficult because there's not that much incentives to do that nowadays. The research is still lots in silo, and so I will suggest this young person to maybe try to work at the interface between digital technologies and other disciplines like health and diplomacy. we are in the context of the climate change, so it's difficult to advise the people to make travel and things like that, because it's. I still believe that travels are important because it's the way to understand better the world. But for sure, we have this
You can take
issue.
the train.
And I think also it's very important that they try to cultivate a kind of critical lens of using digital technologies, because there is a lots of optimism, techno-optimists in this world. But I think it's I'm still very optimistic about the AI and digital technologies. But I think we have to think about also the impact, the environmental impact of the tools that we are using. And this is not something I was thinking about when I start to do computer science, for sure. But I think it starts to be very, very important nowadays. And trying to cultivate also maybe the slowness, or do some slow science. I think because when I'm now working more closely with policymakers, and I see that sometimes there is a kind of urgency to find solutions, immediate solutions to the problems, but sometimes maybe we need to wait a little bit and be more slow in the response that we are giving to policymakers. It's not, for sure, it's not the same world. We are in very different worlds between science and policymaking, but I think we should try to cultivate this.
So my next question is, can research change the world? It's along the same lines. I'm young. I'm not sure what to do. Can I engage in research for changing the world? From what I understand, you're saying that there are some impact of the research on the real world through technology, through dialogue, through collaboration. But you just mentioned also the fact that indeed you influence also policymakers. So which one is the fastest route to changing the world?
I think evidence-based policies are important. So we're putting the science as a kind of way to influence the science diplomacy is important. So influence the policymakers. Because if you are looking at, even inside the UN, there's a lots of policy making that is not evidence-based. So it's, we don't know exactly. It's driven by some geopolitical interests. So it's very important because science, even it's not really always the case, science tries to be quite neutral and try to preserve the different perspective and voices. So I think it's maybe the best way to do diplomacy nowadays if we don't want to be biased in some ways. Yeah.
Can you share some of your thoughts on future research directions in your domain, maybe AI and SDGs?
I think the next, we have seen a lots of interest since 2 or 3 years now about generative AI, because nobody knows about AI before. AI is not new. It started in 1956, with this boys band of a few researchers that in the US who were thinking that in one summer they will solve all the problems of AI, and it was not the case. We are still working on that. But so the general public knows now about AI since quite recently. So the next trend will be, I guess, the use of agents. So we see more and more use of this kind of assistant. So we transfer our agency to this kind of software that will do some activities on our behalf, like, I don't know, booking some trips or some hotel, restaurants, or trying to find the best schedule to meet someone else. So we'll see more and more of these kinds of so moving progressively to kinds of monolithic AI. So where we just discuss with one system with a more distributed AI. So it's I think this is the next trend in the context of AI, and this is interesting because it's you can have also this kind of you have multiple perspectives because it's a cooperation between different agents and humans. So and at the end we should think about collective intelligence. So trying to combine these agents with humans in order to solve some of the global pressing issues that we have nowadays. Yeah.
Earlier, you said you were optimistic. Give me some reasons to hope. Assuming I'm a young person, And the world is what it is right now, with war, with climate change, the SDGs not on track, the planetary boundaries. Why shall I be optimistic, Serge?
Yeah, we should stay optimistic, because if it's not the case, we stop everything and we do something else. But I think the technology is something interesting, is that it's a way also to connect people. So we have now kinds of global understanding of because we are able to connect with people with lots of different backgrounds and coming from different countries, and so I guess this is a way for the people to be more connected. And I've already worked with different projects where the people from the South, for example, they are able to exchange with other people from the South. I'm quite a strong believer on this kind of South-South cooperation. So where people share their local experience on using some tools or the knowledge that they have, and they can share this knowledge with between, for example, Africa and Southeast Asia. So it's I think this is possible only through technology, because it's if you want to not to add too much to the carbon that we are already producing. So I think we have to use this kind of communication. So so communication is something that keep me optimistic about the future. But it's difficult.
Thank you, Serge. And that wraps up today's episode of the R&D Unplugged podcast. I'm Shahab, your host. A huge thank you to our guest, Serge, for sharing valuable insights with us. A big thank you to all of our listeners. R&D Unplugged is a podcast from the Learning Planet Institute. This episode was produced by Annalena Neuro and Shahab Nastar, with recording and editing by Jean-Marc Sevin. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. You can find all of our podcasts and further information about our activities at our website at learningplanetinstitute.org/podcasts. Thanks for listening, and we speak soon.
Learning Planet Institute.